Welcome to the Days of Noah podcast, where we talk all things historical, biblical, and strange. We're trying to unpack the supernatural, how it connects to history, the present, and the future. So we really just want to dive into that journey of how do we understand the context of what we see around us, what happened in the past, and how it connects to the future. Jesus said, "As in the days of Noah, so shall it be again when I come back." That's what we want to understand. So, enjoy. So, I thought we'd try to do a quick recap for those that missed it, and then try to jump into the next thing about the tribes.
Alright.
And it's obviously not going to be exhaustive. We'll keep it going and add to it and let people do their own research and discussion. But
So I was looking in the footnotes of my one of my Bibles, my main Bible that I use, for Numbers chapter 14 with the spies report and the giants.
okay.
Well, it had a footnote that took you over, and it actually said Nephilim. It said the Hebrew word for giants is Nephilim. So that's where and then some people get very, like this, the guy you shared, he was referring to the original offspring as Nephilim, but he was also referring to the children and the generations. He was still using the same term, Nephilim, for the different generations. Some people like to make the Rephaim, I think it is.
Yeah.
So some like to keep the term Nephilim with the original GNA, or the original, the pure form of
50-50.
Spring. But if you have, if they're reproducing and they're producing more, some people don't like using the term Nephilim.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard Rephaim used, well, and it may be because that's what's used in the Bible, probably. After the flood.
Yeah, he did make mention of this video because he was talking about how Moses, being the author of the first 5 books, used the term Nephilim and then used Nephilim again, but then in another part Moses used a different term, Rephaim or something.
Yeah, which means like the dead ones or something like that. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah. Yeah, so I got some good tribes. I don't want to get too much into it, but I'm up to like episode, I don't know, 114 or something on Blurry Creatures. And they just had...
Okay, you flying.
Yeah, they just... Well, because every, 3 or 4 episodes is a members only, and I'm waiting to become a member. I figured maybe once I get up through all of them, then become a member and then catch up on those.
Don's joining us.
Is he jumping in via phone?
Yeah, via the link.
All right.
Morning.
Hey, good morning.
Hey, Don.
How's it going?
Good.
Good.
Excellent.
I was supposed to sleep in this morning. It's my day off.
Oh.
6:50. And then my son comes in the room. My wife's awake. I was like,
yep.
That's the way it works.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Well, thanks for
Now thinking coffee.
Hey, on days when I can't make it to your place earlier, Pete, this works out really good.
No problem.
Yeah, to zoom in.
Yep.
And then we might have somebody else joining us on the group chat that she might chime in or at least listen in as she drove to Stoughton.
Okay.
Yep. So let's do a kind of a recap, and then kind of, I mean, very informal. Ask questions, interrupt, all that. But so the last time, what we were trying to do is look at the kind of the case for and against the angel view.
Upside down, Don.
You're upside down.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm recording. I'm recording the audio, so when you're upside down on video, then everything that's recorded is backwards. So we don't want that.
Yeah, backing track. Yeah. Anyway.
Yep. So last time we were talking about sons of God, that term B'nai Elohim, that the Old Testament uses about 5 times, I think. And so the commonly taught interpretation, commonly in terms of seminaries teaching pastors, is very common to have that interpreted as the sons of Seth marrying the daughters of Cain in Genesis 6:4, I believe it is. And so we were so I looked up some videos on the people that believe that and why. And so I'll just briefly run through some of their views. They think that because chapters 4 and 5 are talking about human genealogy, that, to drop angels in chapter 6 is strange. They say angels can't physically procreate with humans because they're merely spiritual. One source was talking about the difference between the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, versus the Masoretic text, which is directly Hebrew, and saying that that's where we get incorrect translations, which I haven't looked into that a whole lot, and it'd be interesting to see what the pros and cons are of the Septuagint versus the Masoretic.
If I may,
Mm-hmm.
I've looked into that a bit, and sorry, I'm like running around the house doing stuff.
Oh, that's all right.
So if you look at my picture, you'll get sick from my background. But the Septuagint, which I believe it means the number 70, six scribes or whatever from every single tribe. Judah, Dan, all
Okay.
those actually did the translation into Greek.
Okay.
And I believe that was kind of along God's line because this happened within the 400 years between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And as you all know, Rome ended up, making roads everywhere, basically opening up the world for the gospel to move. And the main language in the area when Rome took over was Greek. Okay. And so they were still using the Hebrew language within the synagogue, but Greek actually started to become a big one. There was also Aramaic that came in as a language, and that was...
Don, let's ask real quick. Because of that, would you say, wasn't the New Testament the original translation, or maybe the original language that the authors, Paul and the disciples, did they use Greek?
It would make sense
or would
to
it
say...
be...
Yeah, it would make sense to say that, but I can't answer that definitively.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It was also said that Christ did quote some things from Septuagint, but again, that's in the conjecture area.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that background. I don't. I guess when I'm thinking of those things, I don't really know like which one is preferable or which one is more accurate. I guess the Masoretic was kind of similar to how we ended up with
Tamara's coming in.
Oh, cool. Tamara. It's
tomorrow.
I know.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
Hey.
That's all right. Good to see you.
You.
So we were just talking about briefly the sons of Seth versus sons of or angel view versus Sethite view recap before we kind of move into some of the giant tribes. And so I was just briefly going through a list of some things that I found as opponents of the angel view, that it was just humans that was being referenced. And then Don was bringing up, because one of the points was, well, some translations use the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, and some use the Masoretic, which was kind of formulated by the Jewish leaders, so it stayed in their original language. And Don was sharing a bit about how that Septuagint came about. And I am recording the audio, so tomorrow when I send that out, you can kind of go back and listen to that right before you joined in. Yeah, so I'll just keep, in the interest of time, I'll just keep running down the list. So these are kind of what I found as the opponents of the angel view, saying these things, that chapter 4 and 5 are human genealogy, so why would they mention angels in chapter 6 and not humans? They'll say angels are merely spiritual, don't have physical bodies. They say if the angels are the ones that sinned, why is the judgment against men or humankind? And they'll look at the references in Jude and Peter in the New Testament, and we can talk through those verses. But proponents of the angel view, we tend to believe that that's referring to that event of angels coming down. And they say, oh no, that's a reference of the angels that fell with Lucifer, the rebellious angels. I did a little bit of looking into that, and it seems that like the only place in our Bible we get this idea of other angels rebelling with Satan is not until Revelation. Very end of the Bible, the Apostle John was an old man. He was put on the island of Patmos as kind of a prison, and that's when he had his revelation. So it's the only mention that we get. So it does seem a little strange that Jude and Peter would be referring to that event when there really isn't any biblical context for it. Yeah, go ahead, Don.
One thing that would maybe be easily overlooked would be that there is all the demon possession that they talk about throughout the New Testament, and that might refer to other angels that have followed him, the devil. But one other thing is that there's also multitudes. So if you wanted to go back to the translation in the King James where it says, it usually refers to devil or devils. I think they call them unclean spirits. So right. I don't know where that jump happened in translation, but it seems like it refers to others other than Satan. But can Satan be 10 things at once? Probably. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point, and that's probably a very good topic. Luke, would you agree to get into at some point the origin of demons? Yeah. Are they fallen angels, or are they the disembodied spirits of these giants as we're hearing?
In my past, actually doing a series using the Gospels mainly as a text on Vexed, and it's already at like 12 or 13 parts. But that would be an interesting conversation, because you're right. One of the viewpoints that even my pastor didn't mention in his foundation message, the very first message, is the opinion of the origin of demons is actually, so if you think of the flood taking place, worldwide flood of Noah, so you had all these, so we're believing that there was these race of Nephilim, these race of giants, and there was this corruption around the world between men and women, so there's offspring, right? So worldwide flood takes place, the physical bodies are being killed, but these are just like us, they're created with the part spirit that won't die from water. So where do those spirits go? Well, they're wanting a host. They're wanting to occupy something. That's where we talk about like demon possession and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So there's the theory that demons, Don, you cut out just for a second. I don't know if you can hear me. But there's a theory that demons are actually the spirits of these, the dead that from the flood. Mm-hmm. So, you know, they're roaming around the world, and they still have those character traits of lust and all these different immoral type character traits that they want to do, and they're looking for a host to whom they can satisfy those evil desires.
Right. Yep. Yeah, so that's kind of the origin of that. But that's a very good topic in and of itself that we can get into at some point. Don turned into a silhouette. Hopefully he comes back. Yeah, so I'll just keep moving on there. They reference in, I don't know, I don't have the verse reference, but there's a verse that says, for when has God ever called an angel his son? And so they say, well, therefore angels can't be his sons. And then they'll reference in Matthew, angels in heaven do not marry, even though that was an answer to a question that was posed to Jesus about, hey, what if a woman has a husband and he dies and she marries another, and then over it happens, and then in heaven, who's going to be her husband? And Jesus is like, no, it's not going to be like that. Heaven's different, you know, they're not going to, you'll be like the angels, you won't marry. So that's kind of referring to marriage and kind of that union there. As, you know, that has nothing to do with, the ability to procreate, right? Like, you don't have to have marriage to procreate. So he's not saying it can't happen. He's saying in heaven this doesn't happen. In heaven there isn't marriage. All right, maybe Don is back. You back, Don? All right.
I feel like I'm back.
That's okay. And then, okay, so then real briefly again, affirmations of the angel view is that there's no mention of the line of Seth or Cain in Genesis 6. So if they meant sons of Seth, you'd think maybe they would just say it. If they meant daughters of Cain, why not just say it? In the extra biblical books, Enoch and Jubilees, it states angels in place of sons of God. So it has basically the same stories are talked about, the same event of sons of God, saw the daughters of men were beautiful and married them, chose wives for themselves. But in those books, it actually just says angels instead of sons of God. And then I think we mentioned on one other call the law of first mention, which is a way of interpreting the Bible. And it's not like it has to be this way, but it's just one clue for how to interpret. Like when a term or phrase is first appears, that gives a context of how we should look at it in general, not always, in general as it appears later. And so I think most agree that the book of Job was perhaps the oldest first written book of the Bible. And so there's a few times in Job where that same term B'nai Elohim is used, and probably the most prominent is in chapter 38 when God is saying, "Where were you when I did this and did that?" And the verses about when the sons of God saw the creation of the world. And so it's talking about when God's creating and the sons of God are there. So we can derive that that's not humans, because we weren't there yet when creation was happening. And it's that same B'nai Elohim that's used.
But it's interesting.
Yeah.
You just kind of, just by explaining that, rebutted one of your words against, talking about when, just that scripture in Ezekiel, it's talking about angels being sons. It's like part of the family.
Yeah.
You know, even though they're not human. Oh, we got an echo. But yeah, so it's like, yeah, the angels were created, or a line of creation before humans were created, which is interesting.
Yeah, the chronology there. This was a good one. I think I got this from Dante Fortson, which, if I can recommend it, it's only like a $3 Kindle book, and it's really short, but he kind of breaks down some of the arguments against the sons of Seth view. If the sons of Seth are the righteous ones, so that's kind of the contention that's being taught on the line of Seth, is that, no, the sons of God, it means the righteous sons of Seth. Okay, well, the text says that they were the ones that initiated choosing these daughters of Cain, daughters of men. So if they're righteous, why would they be the ones initiating this? And then also, we don't have anything in the Bible that prohibits against the line of Seth marrying the line of Cain. So there's no prohibition against this, that this was a bad thing. And then how do we get giants from a human marrying a human? So that's another big problem, is it says that they bore giants. And then again, if this line of Seth is righteous, why did they perish in the flood? Why weren't they saved? So there's just a number of things to consider there. It's not definitive by any means, but just as kind of we're looking at this, and that can be an ongoing discussion if people want to kind of add to that. That's just a very brief list that we have so far. So, but yeah, so then kind of the next thing that segued from there was, okay, what evidence do we have in the Bible that there were giants and that there were different tribes that are referred to that way? And then how does that connect to when God instructs the Israelites, or the Hebrews, depending on the timeline there, to wipe them out, man, woman, child, and animals, in many cases? So our contention, I think Luke and I would agree, is that it was because of this DNA corruption of the hybrid species from this initial incursion of angels coming to Earth, that, I mean, if we think about how the time of Noah was described, that there was so much violence and evil all the time, like unprecedented, that God is like, okay, I got to deal with this flood. So if it's that kind of creature that he's dealing with, then maybe the case is that they weren't fully human, and that because of not being fully human, they had these incredibly evil tendencies. And so they were being told to wipe out. Now, This is a little sidebar to that. I was just listening to, I forget what episode. I'm up to like 114 or something on Blurry Creatures, and one of the guests was talking about skinwalkers or shapeshifters. So the ability of someone through occult ceremonial means to be able to turn into some other creature like an animal. And I'll have to go back and find the reference, but it was fascinating because he's talking about I want to say it was the Anakim, but he was saying that they were known to be able to do this, to be able to turn into animals through.
Well, and Peter, my wife is from New Mexico, and there's a lot of, it's called the Land of Enchantment. Well, you have the Native American influence, a lot of Mexican pagan religions that have crept into there, and she could testify that she saw somebody that morphed from being a human into almost like an animal-like creature, ran around the park with the speed of an animal, and then came back. So she has testimonies of seeing stuff like that, even in her life.
Yeah.
Just a question, not trying to be a smart aleck here,
We welcome
peyote, mushrooms, acid, anything like that?
No. She, at worst, it was marijuana. But that's a good question, and I would have to ask her, was she high at the time? I don't know.
Yep. Yeah, so, I'll find the exact spot in which episode that is, but it's pretty fascinating. So he's basically saying, God, knowing this, told them to wipe out the animals as well. Don't take them with, because they may, with the idea that they may try to disguise themselves, as livestock or something like that, and be able to escape death. And that makes a lot of sense that God would do that. And then even don't take any of the idols or the precious metals, all their items, because again, in idol worship, they were inviting evil spirits into these items. So he didn't want them to be corrupted in that way. If some of these physical items that by themselves are nothing, but because of the practices of the people, they're inviting these spirits to inhabit them. So,
and add to that, what the way I understood kind of deliverance or cleansing of your home type of practice, the way I've been taught, a spirit can be, for example, you'll have certain people practicing witchcraft or different pagan religions that will take someone's hair, or
right.
We got voodoo down here in New Orleans with the voodoo dolls and stuff like that. They'll take articles of somebody's and will pray over it, curse over it, and there might be an association. Hang on, busy. There might be a demonic attachment to those items. But if there is, and you can pray over it, you can cleanse it, you can ask that to be removed. But if there's a literal inscription, an image, like an idol, like a Buddha, I would say, that demon spirit has a legal right to stay on that. So you could pray over that Buddha thing all you want. It's like, legally, I get to be attached to that. So the practice I was taught, and I think it's echoed in the Old Testament, God's like, no, these images of these coins that demon god pictures on them. You got to destroy them. They're not coming. I don't want them in your house, because there's legal reasons why those spirits could be attached to those things. So I kind of go along with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like God was. You got to be clean. You got to be clean. Get this stuff out of the realm of where you're living.
Yep.
And everything.
Yeah, and in a number of episodes of Blurry Creatures, there's guests talking about how, having the physical DNA, like hair or something like that, of different animals allows them to then be able to turn into these things. There's a testimony of a guy that, fascinating life, his name is William Schneblin. I think he grew up around Milwaukee, actually, but he lived as like a Mormon, a Catholic, a Satanist, a Druid. I mean, like, he lived all these before he came to Christianity. And when he was in a high level of Satanism, he got the choice to be able to become a vampire or a werewolf, and he had seen his colleagues become werewolves, and it was a painful transformation, and he's like, I think I'll choose vampire, it's a little sexier. But so there's precedent, is what I'm kind of getting at. As weird as it sounds, there's precedent for being able to, for things to transform, at least briefly, through, evil means. The episodes in Blurry Creatures talking about skinwalkers, the Navajo guest said that it always involves some sort of human sacrifice. So there's someone that has to die in order for that ability to happen. But I thought that was kind of interesting as far as why God would tell them to wipe all of these things out. Yeah.
And then kind of we can think about Nimrod into all of this too, because it said that he began to be a Gibberine. Mm-hmm. And there is the school of thought that this individual, Nimrod, was a human, and then he became to be something else.
Right.
Almost like he began to be... it's almost like he tainted his DNA, similar to how the hybrids were a mixture. And I know there's a lot of different Luciferian organization that look to Nimrod as something that they would like to transcend to, like a human 2.0. Like, wow, he actually did it years ago, transcended his current state into something different. They're like, that's something we need to get back to,
Yep.
So that's just another example, and in the Bible, of somebody changing from one thing to another.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, any other comments or questions on that? I mean, we're not trying to be exhaustive, and we can always jump back and forth as we keep talking about it. And we're not trying to say we're authorities on any of this stuff, but just kind of piecing one thing together and seeing if it makes sense.
You talk about vampires, werewolves, and things like that. Was the thought that they were Hollywood type, or were they like a whole different kind of idea? Meaning like a vampire that would maybe feed on something different, like life force or something like that.
Right. Well,
good question.
In terms,
do you think
go ahead.
of those terms? You think of Hollywood? You think of movies? In my mind, when it comes to a vampire, and that was a character trait of the Nephilim, the giants, and their offspring, was cannibalism, drinking of blood, and then what did God say in the law? He said, "Do not consume blood." So there's these practices that were immoral that the cultures, the heathen cultures outside of the Israelites were doing, and were influenced by the Nephilim and their offspring, that they were starting to do. And God's like, don't be like them. You know, I want you separate. I want you different. I want you holy, because when you do those things, it taints you. It corrupts yourself. So,
yeah, that's there's a good guest, pretty far out there stuff that I just listened to, where he's talking about the difference between transgression and sin and iniquity. And iniquity is like a perversion that, like you just described, Luke, where it changes you. And so I think that has some ties to, like, where God says the iniquity of the father will pass down 3 or 4 generations. I think that there's actually a genetic change that takes place. Like, if we are, you know, say we have an alcoholic father or something like that, or if we become one, like, there's a genetic predisposition. So, like, or even if I eat like a terrible diet and then I have a kid, like, I've affected my genetic line by my lifestyle. Like, so there's connections there. Yeah, no, but briefly, Don, on to kind of add to what Luke said to your question, what the testimony of this one person was when he was a Satanist was it was a literal thing that they had the ability to become. And according to him, and again, this is just anecdotal, but he said when he was a vampire, he said there was like a whole year where he lived on nothing but blood. So obviously, you got to have some serious evil power in you to survive physically on nothing but blood. I
would venture to guess, because going back to even my wife and other things that I've heard of, the term, I don't know if you guys have heard of it, astral project.
Yeah.
Does that sound
yeah, where you're outside of your body?
Project? Yeah, so so it's kind of like, let's say you're laying on your bed, and if you have this ability, and it's you're tapping into the spiritual realm, and you're literally taking your spirit. I don't know if you guys can hear.
I can hear.
I don't know. Don might have dropped off.
Okay.
But basically, you could take your spirit and then go. I could go eavesdrop on you in Wisconsin.
Right.
So doing that, my physical body is still here in Louisiana, but I am, through the power of a demonic spirit.
Yep.
Because this is something that God wants us to tap into. You're using a demon spirit to connect your spirit, because we're made spirit, soul, and body.
Mm-hmm.
So you're doing something that's unlawful in God's eyes, and you're actually seeing through your spirit, and you physically can go to different parts of the globe.
Yep.
So you're using a demonic spirit to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm venture to guess that this testimony of the Satanist, he's using demon spirit to manipulate his spirit, his soul, well, probably his physical body.
Okay.
To desire. We're talking about how these spirits desire things that God said is unlawful.
Yeah.
Drinking of blood is one of them.
Right.
Okay. So there is a spirit that is almost like a vampire spirit, a spirit that desires blood.
Right.
It's going to inhabit that person that welcomed it, and now it's using that person's body as a host to consume that lustful desire of consuming the blood.
Sure. Yeah. To add to that, so some real good books from an ex-Satanist. His name is John Ramirez, and he's got some real good books on prayer and different things. But his life story, I believe, is called Out of the Devil's Cauldron. And he was very, very high up in, I think it's called Palo Mayombe, but it's a witchcraft Satanist kind of thing. It was in his family. Wow, so he grew up with it, and he became really high level. But he talks about astral projection. he would basically like fly through neighborhoods, and cast down curses on neighborhoods. He'd go into hospitals and cast down curses so people would die. They wouldn't recover in the hospital. All these things that he used to do. So yeah, that's a real thing that and so what I kind of gather as I'm listening to all this weird stuff on the show, and then we're talking about it, is there. So one way I think to think of occult powers, demonic powers. Why does blood drinking or sacrifice or sins create a tapping into some sort of power? And there seems to be like a way that God knows and his enemies know, the devil and his angels and the demons. They know how spiritual and physical things operate, like according to certain, like we have laws of physics, right? We have
cause and effect.
Yeah, cause and effect. Like we can we have textbooks on how we've discovered mathematical laws or laws of science and different things that were like, yeah, this is repeatable. It happens over and over. This is how this works. And so it's like, and even all the false religions too, like if you get into like New Age beliefs, or like they're all hearkening back to something that's actually true, like about how the world works and how people get power from in different ways. And most of it obviously is forbidden because it leads you down a bad path away from God, gets you connected with evil spirits and so on. But that's kind of like, it goes back to the angels coming down. In Enoch, it talks about all the different things that the Watcher angels were teaching mankind, like about making weapons, about all sorts of things. I'd have to go back to the text, but so all these different principles of how to manipulate things and how to do things, they're pretty smart and they know how those things work. Yeah, go ahead.
This is just kind of I've thought about that quite a bit as to where the skills of human beings came from, because it's like if the scientific exception, the evolution thing, the trial and error that it would take to make a cake would be so unbelievably
absolutely
Yep. It just that's one thing that I come back to a cake, because it's like, how would anyone know that it's this and this and this? Now, obviously, there might be some experimentation, but you have to have an initial idea of what a cake is going to be before you're going to start making it.
Yep.
Or start working with it.
Yep.
Back in the day, it's not like you had material that you could waste in trying to figure out how to bake a cake. But that's
true.
Kind of my
limited resources. No, that's an excellent point, Don, and that's actually gets addressed in. I don't have to chronicle these. This was another Blurry Creatures episode where they're talking about that. And so think of a cake. Well, think of something much more dangerous. Mushrooms. Most mushrooms in the wild will kill you. How in the world did they know that this one is going to cause you to have this hallucinogenic experience? You're not going to die. You couldn't do much trial and error there.
Right.
So yeah, there's a ton of things that are like, where did we even get the basis to start this understanding?
But Peter,
yeah,
I think you hit it ahead. So as we're taught through Enoch and others that this knowledge was passed on, both good and evil things. So there was definitely an understanding by obviously our Creator and then also his created beings, the angels. So they all were intelligent and instructed, both in good ways and bad ways, knew the cause and effect of, if you do this, this is outcome's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's either going to cause you to tap into more things, it's going to make you desire evil things, or it's going to cause you to get closer to Yahweh, get closer to me. It's going to keep you holy, keep you pure. It's not going to, as the Scripture talks about, how when we sin, we make an avenue where the devil can attack us.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have an advocate through the New Testament, Jesus, to wash us, cleanse us. We can make a hedge of protection. We can protect ourselves. When you look at Job, Job was righteous and was protected. He was living a moral life, and there is this protection. Now, if he would have done these certain things that were taught, Satan would have had to petition God to attack.
Oh,
Job.
right. Would have had just the legal right there.
So it's interesting. It's a legal understanding that we don't have. The angels, Satan, God knows the laws that are written.
Right. Yep.
And what if you do this? It's like we're born into this world. We have no idea what the laws
Mm-hmm.
are. We're born into this sinful flesh.
Imagine if we got dropped into a football game, and let's say we were born in the 1500s, and we got dropped into 2022 in the middle of a Packer game, and with all our gear on and told to play. Like, we would get annihilated, we would get flags thrown at us. We wouldn't have any idea of how the rules operate, because the people that have been there for years and years know how it works. And that's exactly, we're talking about ancient spirits that have been around for thousands of years.
The one thing I would, depending on how you were born and raised back in the 1500s, you might go through a line killing all the football players too. So I mean,
might bring your spear or something.
There's different lifestyles with different periods, and I mean, I wouldn't want to from back in those days. So maybe
right.
I get it's kind of a hard tie-in here to what we're talking about, but when it comes to the angels and stuff like that, talking or teaching of warfare, weaponry, things like that, going on as once we got into the 20th century, where maybe some whispers in the ears of Mr. Gatlin or all these different weapons. It's like, this is way better because this will destroy XYZ. So
yeah, makes you wonder.
And I think if you look at what happened with Jesus after he was baptized and the Spirit of the Lord came on him, and God the Father said, "This is my beloved Son." He went into the wilderness, right? And it's documented in the Gospels that Satan tempted Jesus and said, "Here, all the kingdoms of the world, bow down and worship me, and I will give this authority, this power, this whatever." How many men have taken that offer? When you look at politicians, when you look at musicians, when you look at all these different things.
It's Lord of the Rings.
They've embraced and taken a part of themselves. And I think I'm of the opinion that even if someone does that, makes a pact with the enemy to gain worldly stuff, I'm of the opinion if you're still breathing, there's still life in your body, even somebody that's become a werewolf or a vampire, whatever, they're still human and there's still breath in their body. There's still a God that can save them, that can turn them from that. I don't think anybody's permanently lost. But my point of bringing that up is obviously we're seeing this transaction that we're talking about in Genesis 6. The angels go to me, the father. I've got this beautiful set of daughters. And then there's an agreement. Give me your daughters. I will give you this. I will give you knowledge. I will give you wisdom and these arts that I don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a transaction that takes place. And you see it taking place throughout. I'm of the opinion, and I've done some research dealing with Hitler, dealing with the Nazis, dealing with their occult practices and stuff like that, that even in our last 100 years, there's been transactions that have been made, just like in ancient times. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the reason why we're seeing an explosion of knowledge and technology that's taken place. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
There's plenty of evidence to it, but it's interesting that Jesus was tempted in that way, but there's been many men who have taken that offer.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's Lord of the Rings. Right away, yeah. You remember the opening 5 minutes of Lord of the Rings is, these rings of power were given to these kings, right? But they didn't know what it was going to cost them. They just thought, oh, this is great. Yeah.
And what's the thing in Jurassic Park? It's like we're too busy thinking about whether we could. We didn't stop to think whether we should.
Yep. Yep.
You got the humanistic side of things that are not thinking about God, that are just thinking about this planet and its natural stuff. Well, if I can genetically change my DNA and become a human 2.0, or create super soldiers as DARPA and China and others are working on right now, to elevate ourselves, mm-hmm. then it's the old lie in Genesis. You won't die. You can live forever. You can morph into something. That's the whole transhumanist movement of today.
Right.
Is you don't need God to. You can do it this way.
Yep.
So there is a connection between the Genesis 6 narrative and what's going on.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure we'll flesh that out. Much more in the future. It's how that ties into like Mark of the Beast and in Revelation, where it says they will seek for death and not find it, so they literally won't be able to kill themselves, it seems. But I know we're getting close on time, and we haven't got too much in it, and that's okay, because it's a lot of good discussion, and we'll pick it up from here next time. But let's just briefly go through some of the mentions of tribes that are described as giants. So in Deuteronomy 9, you have the Anakim. And then in Joshua 14 and 15, you have this person Arba, the father of Anak. And Anak it can mean neck, referring to the size of their neck, or also Canaanite. And so then you have Goliath, who was of the tribe of Gath. And I'm kind of going off of memory here because my notes I didn't write down very complete. But so I believe it came from Arba to then Anak, and then the sons of Anak went to Gath. In Joshua 11, it says the Anakim remained in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. So that's how that lineage of from Arba, who may have been a first generation Nephilim, we don't really know, but that line led to Goliath. And then real briefly on Goliath, I don't know, maybe if you guys want to check this out about the length of a cubit. If I know there's a standard cubit of 18 inches. There's the royal cubit, which is 20 or 22 inches. I don't know if there's any that are shorter than that. from what I've heard, it's the shortest is 18. But that would put Goliath at about 9'9". So he was 6 cubits in a span, which is 6.5 cubits. And then it also describes the weight of his armor, and things he was holding, and it was easily 200 pounds. So, I know I've heard it said, Goliath was like 6'6", and the Israelites are like 5'3", So, but okay, if he's wearing 200 pounds of armor, a 6'6" guy is going to be what, 250 pounds? Yeah, you wouldn't be too effective in battle, for one thing. And then it describes I think it's in Numbers, that when the spies came back from Canaan, so kind of jumping around here, when they came back from Canaan, they were so fearful of what the spies said about the inhabitants of the land, they wanted to go back to Egypt and be slaves again. So, I'm sorry if we're talking about 6'6", even 7-foot guys. Would you rather go back to being a slave than fight, 7-foot guys? I don't think that makes a lot of sense. The only other time, to my knowledge, that the Israelites said that is when they were thinking they were going to starve to death with Moses. They're out in the desert. They're like, it was better in Egypt. We had all kinds of food, Let us go back there. So, when their life is on the line, basically, they're like, yeah, Egypt's better. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. In Numbers 13, 32, and 33, it says the land devours its inhabitants. The men were of great stature. We saw the giants. We were like grasshoppers to them. Let's see. I think that's all. Oh, so, okay, some of the tribes. So there's the Emims in Deuteronomy 2, 10, and 11 are described as giants. In Deuteronomy 2, there's the Zamzumans. And then a few other tribes I mentioned, and I'm sorry I don't have the references, but there's Amorites, Hittites, Jebusites, and Canaanites that are described as being of great stature. Yeah, so, and kind of the land devours its inhabitants. That idea is like, and we know there was cannibalism going on, and that's kind of that idea that even all of the resources of food couldn't sustain these things, that they turned to cannibalism. The land devours itself.
Yeah, Pete, you hit a bunch of those. I think number 13 is a very interesting account of the spies. And as you, I think, named near the end there, it describes this, some of the tribes that were there.
Yeah.
And it said in Numbers 13:29, the Amalekites dwelt in the land of the south, the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites dwelt in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwelled by the sea along the banks of the Jordan. And these were all part of those tribes. And I watched a lecture from L.A. Mazzulli, and there was an ancient rock with carving on it in for a while an unknown transcript that was recently interpreted, and it was found up in the north, Pennsylvania, Ohio, somewhere up in there. And guess what? The inscription on there has the term Canaanites on it.
Mm-hmm.
So, as we read in the scriptures, so you have giants that were before the flood, they're wiped out. Genesis 6 says there was giants or Nephilim after the flood. We're seeing examples of this in the Promised Land.
Mm-hmm.
And as the conquest of Joshua, Caleb, King David, pushing them out, they're spreading around the world. if they don't get killed off, they're running for their lives because God is empowering the Hebrews to take them over.
Yep.
So they're going, and there's accounts in Peru and other places that these or Native Americans of these giants arriving to their lands.
Yep.
And then doing things and
there's
stuff.
There's even Native American stories that say that the Great Flood, that the Creator sent the Great Flood to wipe these things out. That even comes from Native American history. But yeah, we've got evidence of Hebrew writing in North America. We've got Canaanite altars. There's evidence of these things being found, and then of course we can get into all the megaliths and stuff that were built. And the Native Americans are like, we didn't build these mounds, we didn't build these things. They say themselves they didn't build them. So, but that goes off into another whole thing we can get into another time.
But Numbers 13 is the spies account is really interesting because you get the different tribes and where they lived, and then at the very end, as you quoted, we saw the giants, the descendants of the Anak came from the giants. So these were descendants from the original Nephilim. Nephilim is the Hebrew for giant. And like you said, that we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so they were in their sight.
Yeah. Again, I don't think, you could say maybe hyperbole, but are you really going to use that language if someone's a foot taller than you or 2 feet taller than you? I don't, and and then I guess Arba was the father of Anak. So descendants of Anak. So some have said, these Nephilim were sterile. Once they mated with humans, they couldn't give birth. But right there we have from Arba to Anak to descendants, and then they settled in Gath, so that may have been a lineage of Goliath and his 4 brothers. But yeah, next time let's look at Numbers 13 more in detail. I think that's a good place to hone in on. And then just each of us kind of look through and see what tribes are described in these ways. And then hopefully we can try to map out, okay, did God ask this tribe to get totally wiped out? Because in my mind that's the case for why God was justly, did this, why he did the flood. It wasn't just sin, it was actually preserving human DNA so that the Messiah could come. If you think about the promise to Abraham that through you I will bless every nation on earth, that's directly talking about the Messiah, because what's the greatest blessing God ever gave us was the Messiah, and it came through his chosen people. So the idea that Satan tried to pollute human DNA, whether it was his idea or he tempted the Watchers to come down and mate with women, we don't know. But then when that didn't work and Noah and his family was preserved, then they tried to pollute Israel, because at that point then God had taken a nation for himself. So now Satan's going after Israel and trying to get them, swayed into doing what these other nations are doing and marrying. So you see God's mercy in all of this, like, nope, wipe these out, don't marry them. He's making sure that the Messiah can come through just like he's prophesied, because God can't go back on his word, so he said it's going to come through the seed of Eve in Genesis, and so it's got to be that way.
Yeah, exactly right. Through the seed of and it's the seed war that's playing out through the scriptures. I'm going to read Genesis 3. You just talked about it. This is Genesis 3 and 15. And I will put enmity between you and the woman. He's talking to the serpent, and he's talking to Eve. God is. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. So God is describing that she has a seed. So it's interesting that God says that Eve will have a seed, but males are the only ones that have seeds. So it's kind of, to me, it's telling me that there's going to be a virgin birth, because it's through her generation.
Yeah.
So she obviously had offspring and stuff, but eventually we get to Mary, right?
Mm-hmm.
The seed that came through Mary was from God,
right?
And then, he's making reference that the devil. So we talk about, does angels procreate? Why would God say that when referring to Lucifer, or to Satan, the serpent, that he had seed? That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Between your seed and her seed, he shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. And so it obviously, after those words were spoken, the enemy saw through the words of God, like, oh, he's going to come after me through humans.
Mm-hmm.
And so I need to corrupt humans to try to stop him. And then you see the whole explosion 3 chapters later in Genesis 6.
Right.
Which was stopped by God with the flood. But then there's what appears to be another attempt in the Promised Land and other places. And then you fast forward to today. It's like, okay, well, I think Dr. Laura Singler, with her book from tracing the character traits of the Nephilim, all the way to the Federal Reserve, is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
There's podcast, as you know, Pete. But it's this Old Testament story, this war that's been going on, leading up to the final conclusion in the Book of Revelation. And I would love to do a study on prophecies,
mm-hmm.
because I was told through a minister that there's 2,500 prophecies in the scriptures. And 2,000 of them have been fulfilled.
Oh, wow.
A lot of them by Jesus himself.
Yep.
And that no other religion in the world has prophecies like that.
Right.
We got several hundred prophecies that haven't came to pass yet.
Yeah.
But we've got evidence of it was spoken here, it was fulfilled here. It was spoken here, it was fulfilled here.
Mm-hmm.
And no other religion in the world has a deity that died and then rose again.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating distinctions.
A living deity, a living creator, a living God that is coming again to restore the family.
Mm-hmm.
Just like he set out to do from Genesis, he's going to fulfill it in completion in the future. So,
yeah,
I don't know.
That's great. All right. Well, anything else, guys? I think we can probably wrap up there. And I did record it redundantly, so I'll get the audio posted somewhere. Yeah. So that's great. Good discussion, and keep digging in. Like, we don't purport to have all the answers, but it's kind of as one blurry creature guest put it, creating a mosaic that starts to take shape. The picture starts to take shape when we understand the Old Testament and what was going on better. And I think the Bible loses a lot of its meaning and potency when we take some of this supernatural stuff out and explain it away. If it is true, then we're hurting ourselves and others if we're saying, no, God just wiped these people out because he's God and he gets to. you know. But if there's better answers for that, if there's actually merciful answers that he's trying to preserve the Messiah, which is, you know, the greatest gift he's ever given us, then it makes a lot more sense. Like, everything that he does is trying to bring us back into the family, right? So he's, as Michael Heiser says, there's the angels who are God's family in heaven, and God wanted to have a family on this place called Earth. And the parable of the prodigal son is about getting humans back into the family. So, yeah. So we'll leave off there, and I'll send you guys out the audio, and hopefully we can do it again next week.
Sorry I had like a distracted morning, but it was very good to listen in on, so thanks for allowing me to do that today.
Happy to do it.
Yeah.
Can you go ahead and... Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm at my destination, so I'm going to let you guys go, but thanks again for having me, and probably next week, but if not, I'm going to try to at least be consistent on every other week. So.
Sounds good. Good to see ya.
You guys...
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
And, Pete, real quick, I'll take a transcript instead, so if you want to type that up for me.
Oh, yeah.
Please.
Yep, I'll send you the transcription, Bill.
Yeah. Oh, all right, never mind. I'll just listen to the audio.
Yeah, it's probably easier that way.
I'm just curious of how it came through in the recording. I don't know that I want to listen to all this again, but
yeah,
it's good to be. I think a lot of this, like you said, Peter, kind of the purpose of getting together and doing this is because we've listened to so much.
Mm-hmm.
You almost need to write it down or type it up.
Yep.
You know, like a family tree or an outline or something.
Yeah, an outline for sure.
So you kind of organize your thoughts on all the different nuggets that you're consuming, because it's hard to remember them all and to regurgitate it. But if there's an outline there that that would help all of our understandings and kind of solidify.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent goal, and it's kind of what Michael Heiser says he did with the Unseen Realm. It's nothing original to him. Not one thought, he said. He says, my job is to synthesize this information into one place. So I think that would be a very valuable thing as we're talking about, the Sethite view versus angel, the tribes and their origins and how they were described. Like, there's all these different areas that we can hopefully eventually organize, put in an outline, and have as a resource, and say,
we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Nope, it's out there.
For L.A. Mazzulli, there's so many that have done countless decades of research on this stuff.
Yep. Yes. So if I could plug real quick, just because it was on the topic the last couple weeks for us, it's a $3 Kindle book called From Dante Fortson, Fortson.
I'm sorry. That was the author is the one that was speaking that YouTube video.
Yes, on that last video, and L.A. Marzulli gave him a very high compliment that his book on, I forget which book it was that he wrote, but he said it was the best put together book on the subject of the line of Seth, I believe. If I might be misquoting that, but L.A. Marzulli was giving him high praise for his work, and Steve Quayle has referenced his work too. So he's right in the mix of kind of some of these guys that we've known and respected for a while on these topics. So it's a $3 Kindle book, and it's really short, but I think it's got some good questions and answers to this Sethite view, and hopefully that gives us, because we want to know what we believe and why, and be able to answer skeptics, and that's okay if we're skeptical. If we're the skeptical ones, like, we got to know ourselves. So, yeah. So I'll send out a link to that if you guys are interested. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Don, thanks for joining. We'll see you guys next time.
All right.
Talk to you guys later.
All right, bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Days of Noah podcast. My name is Pete. My brother Luke was on the other line, calling in from the great state of Louisiana. Join us next week. We're going to continue the discussion, trying to understand the times we're in, uncovering the past, connecting it with the present, discerning the future.